Russian tanks have been performing somewhat poorly in this conflict, whether it is poor decision making, poor tactics, or just the lack of training. One thing is certain, a lot of their tanks are riddled with problems. And the most famous example is probably the T-72B3, their most numerous tank, or at least used to be before the war started. If you want to know more about its problems, check out the video I did on that topic, but the biggest takeaway from its problems is probably the very poor explosive reactive armor coverage. But earlier this month, footage of Dmitry Medvedev visiting Urovagonzavod, the manufacturer of these tanks, was published on the internet, and in this video we can see the factory workers working on both T-72B3 and T-90M tanks. But probably the most interesting thing from this is that the T-72B3 appears to have undergone some changes, some of which seem to be taken from a more advanced T-90M tank. First, and the most notable thing, is that the turret of the tank appears to have much more ERA pieces all over it, most notably on the roof. You can also see ERA blocks mounted on top of the smoke launchers on the side. If we look at the pictures of T-72B3 tanks, we can see that this area was previously a weak spot, since it was the only part of the turret side that was not covered. We could also see this kind of mounting done previously on the old T-80BV tanks, and it is surprising to me how the Soviets, many decades ago, solved this issue, but the new Russian tanks still retained that problem to this day. It is also worth noting that in late September, new T-80BVM tanks were delivered that also featured an increase in the ERA coverage on the roof of the turret. Another addition to the protection is the addition of the ERA to the front of the mudguards, above the idler wheel. The reason this has been done is because it hits from an angle which would otherwise go through the tracks or the idler wheel would then penetrate the very weak side armor of the tank. This is a problem for many tanks, including the most modern ones that had a lot of effort put into protecting the sides. This solution has been borrowed from the T-90M tank, which is one of, if not the only tank in active service that has had that kind of protection installed on it. And no worries, this kind of protection still offers easy access to the tracks or the wheels, since it is hinged and can also be easily removed. By the way, if you watched my previous video, you might remember the Russian T-80 tank taking out a Ukrainian tank from such an angle that the hit might have struck that area where the new T-72B3 has extra protection added to. Just pointing it out in case someone thinks that the hit there is unlikely. The gun mantlet area has also been protected with some explosive reactive armor. That is most likely because the mantlet area on Russian tanks does not have any kind of composite armor, but is just thick steel. Unlike tanks like the Abrams, for example, which have had composite armor in such area from the start. Now, I have seen some claims that the protruding parts that can be seen on the turret of the new T-72B3 are some kind of unknown sensors, maybe for some active protection system. But I doubt it. There are no sensors this small that would be a part of any active protection system. If we look at the Arena M sensors, which is the APS Russia has been testing for the last couple of years, we can see that the sensors are much bigger, because those are radars that detect incoming threats. Now, are those some kind of mounts? Maybe, but their placement doesn't match that of the hard kill system, so I doubt those are for actual radars. Those could have been some mounts for holding the turret in place for some work in the factory. I don't really know. If someone has some information about these things on the turret, please let me know. The last thing that was seen on the new T-72B3 is that it appears that they have added a shield door for the side that can be closed or opened from the inside by the crew. Originally, on the T-72B3 tanks, the shield for the sight is bolted on from the outside, so you can't close it or open it, which can get the sight dirty or damaged while just driving around, since no one is crazy enough to keep that thing closed when the enemy can always attack you. Same was also seen on those newly delivered T-80BVM tanks. The armored side doors have probably also been taken from the T-90M tank, since it featured such a thing from the start. I have no idea why this wasn't implemented on the T-72B3's Sosna U side from the start too, since the principle is very simple, and many tanks like, again, Abrams, had this feature from their introduction in the early 80s. But after almost a month since this upgrade has been seen in the factories, none of those features have actually been spotted in the field, at least not yet. We don't even know if this is just going to be an upgrade on a very small scale, Or will all T-72B3 tanks Russia has left be upgraded? We can just wait and see, I guess. That would be all. If you like my content, you can consider supporting me on Patreon. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Have a nice day.